I got a question for you guys, particularly those of you who have seen The Phantom Menace in theaters. What did you think? And I'm not talking about like what do you think. I'm talking about what did you think? What did you think leaving that theater? Because in 1999 when it came out, I was 13 years old, and I will fully admit that I was in total and complete denial of what I had just seen. To be fair, my sophomore year in high school, okay, when Attack of the Clones came out, episode 2, I was also kind of in denial. I was like, well, it was better. It was better, right? Because it was less Jar Jar Binks, right? Like, it was, they developed the story, and, But both times around, there was this part of me deep down inside that knew how totally and utterly full of shit my opinion was about that. They both sucked, and I knew it. The thing with these movies is, and I'm borrowing episode 3 from this, all right? I don't include episode 3 on like the epically bad factor, but Star Wars episodes 1 and 2 are epically bad. People who haven't seen them, they're sort of like, oh, well, what? Was it just not the same? Was it like, was it just kind of flat? Did it fall flat? Was it like, he didn't have a good idea for it or anything? No. Actually, I would say George Lucas had a really good idea for the prequel trilogies. And a lot of people like sort of shit on the whole political aspect of the thing. I actually liked that. I actually liked the Empire, the story of the Empire's rise to power. It's the prequel trilogy, believe it or not, is a very good story. You just tend not to notice it because the execution is so heinous that you tend not to notice what was actually good about it. Where George Lucas actually did kind of have a good idea, he just went astray. I mean, that's putting it very lightly. When these movies came out, I mean, they were like epically bad, particularly The Phantom Menace. I mean, the ridiculous CG, which by today's standards has not aged well. And I don't have to get into Jar Jar. Everybody knows about that. It's sort of like putting like you just shoved, like who framed Roger Rabbit? Who miscast Roger Rabbit into like a live action movie where there were actual dignified actors who didn't have a fucking script to work with, and they were working in all like green screen backgrounds. And that's the fucking problem. George Lucas got like really, because the original Star Wars trilogy was like a really big special effects extravaganza, in 1977 when the first one came out. People had never fucking seen anything like that before, and they were like blown away. But it also had a pretty decent story, and it had, like, a lot of characters that you could relate with. It had dialogue that actually worked, and then you got the prequel trilogy where it's just, like, everything is fucking spelled out for you. You can't just, like, watch a character go through something and understand via their actions or, like, no, George Lucas has to spell everything out for you. Nobody was expecting this shit after all the fucking time that we waited, And, a lot of people, again, myself included, walked out of the theater, and, I mean, I made excuses for it. I'm gonna be real. I was sort of like, well, it was, it was still really good. Like, Darth Maul was cool, and the pod race and stuff, and the pod race was cool. I could have done without this fucking goofy, two-headed, multiple language speaking alien announcer. That was really fucking corny. And half of the other pod racers were cartoon characters. That was really fucking dumb. But the actual pod race itself was cool. And Darth Maul obviously was awesome. But again, like, you got that classic scene where he holds out the lightsaber and it's like, and it's like, holy fuck, that's a double-sided lightsaber. And admittedly, that is a noteworthy part of that movie. Like, that really did go down, like, in history, Star Wars history, as being, like, an epic scene. But even it's like the battle between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul, it's something that, like, had never been done in a Star Wars film before. And it's interspliced with all this fucking stupid Gungan fighting the droids fucking corny shit. Fucking Jake Lloyd, like, and I feel fucking bad for that kid. He's not a kid anymore, but he's been through some shit because there are certain assholes out there who cannot separate fiction from reality, and they fucking, you know, rag on him for ruining the Star Wars trilogy or for ruining the Star Wars saga. It's like, dude, fuck you, man. It's like, listen, he was a fucking kid, all right? It's not his fucking fault that he was miscast. It's not his fault that George Lucas fucking cast him, which, by the way, if you watch the fucking DVD edition for Star Wars Episode 1, there were 3 auditions that they showed. 2 of the kids sucked, one of which was Jake Lloyd. The other one nailed it. He was the second kid who came in before Jake Lloyd. He was intense. He had his lines memorized. He looked right at the camera. He gave his, like, proper delivery. But, you know, George Lucas. So I feel bad for that kid. But it was a factor in the movie that the kid who played Anakin sucked. There's a lot of, like, kind of problems with the flow that, like, why the fuck is Anakin a kid? Why couldn't he be a teenager? Like Luke, why couldn't he have been a teenager? Why did he have to be a little kid? Why did his future wife have to be 10 years older than him? That didn't make any sense. I think that what George Lucas was trying to do is he was trying to say, like, look, here's the ultimate innocence. Here's a fucking kid, you know? Isn't he cute? Well, guess what? That fucking kid's gonna grow up to be Darth Vader. And it's sort of like, you know, dude, there's gotta be, like, kind of a build to that, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, I guess the build was supposed to be Star Wars Episode 2. Which had some of the worst dialogue, and I'm not exaggerating, like romantic soap opera fucking terrible dialogue that I have seen in a fucking movie that was released to theaters. I actually personally think that Star Wars Episode 2 is worse than Star Wars Episode 1. And again, I was making excuses for it back when I was in high school. I was like, well, it's better, you know, there's less Jar Jar. No, dude, the dialogue was fucking terrible. The characters were flat. You didn't give a shit about any of them. But again, the story, okay? You start to see Anakin's relationship with Senator Palpatine, and you sort of start to get that gist of, like, okay, all right, this is how the dark side is sort of creeping in. You know, Anakin loses his mother. He goes fucking mental and kills a bunch of people. Damn, this guy's got some darkness in him. In theory, the story, the flow of the story works, or would work. It makes sense why Anakin would turn to the dark side. And if you started it from the beginning, you know, from Episode 1, people would be shocked at the way it turns out, that he succumbs to the dark side and he becomes Darth Vader. And even like the whole idea of like the Galactic Republic and stuff like that. Really cool. You know, the fucking Senate meetings and stuff. And I know that a lot of people criticize that. They're like, oh, dude, come on. I want to watch Star Wars. I don't want to watch a bunch of fucking politics or something. But it's like George Lucas tried to do something different. You know, it was a different galaxy before the Empire took over. And a lot of it, and like even dating back to the original Star Wars, you know, like the fucking stormtroopers and even Darth Vader, like his helmet, it was supposed to be reminiscent of like a Nazi. The Empire was supposed to be like the Nazis, you know? So this is trying to show you, it's kind of similar to like Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, to show you how the Nazis can like infiltrate and, you know, take over. It's a very real life sort of a thing that they put into a science fiction movie, which if you study World War II at all, and you realize that Germany, it's not like Germany was just this fucking, always this fascist empire. It's like, no, there were sections of the government that were straight up against Adolf Hitler. He built enough fucking following, he gained enough power to have everybody who disagreed with him killed. And that's how Nazi Germany started. So the prequel trilogy in like concept is actually very, very clever. In execution, well, maybe not so much. I will say this to the end, Star Wars Episode 3, it's still not really a good movie. I would say that Hayden Christensen was perhaps a little bit miscast. And I don't shit on him as an actor. I know a lot of people love to be like, Hayden Christensen fucking sucks and stuff. Like, if you watch the movie Life is a House, like, he's actually good in that. You know, but he plays an angsty teenager, you know? So I might argue, like, the guy does have acting chops. But he needs to start where he's comfortable, and then maybe he can branch off. Anakin Skywalker, he was not. And Episode 3 is substantially better. It is actually a lot more entertaining than the first two. You can actually sit through it and be like, oh, cool, this is how Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader. I almost kind of wish we could have skipped the first two movies, and the unfortunate thing is that future watchers of Star Wars are most likely going to start with Episode 1, and they're going to watch it and be like, the fuck is this? You know, that's sort of how it is in China. Like, we're trying to market the new Star Wars movies to China, but they're not as big into it as we are. And part of the reason for that is that the first Star Wars movies that were released to their theaters were the prequel trilogy. So, you know, I can't really blame them or anything. But if you marathon those movies, if you watch them like one after the other, and, you know, having seen them many times and being aware of all the immense amount of flaws, if you look at the actual story, there is something there. There is something there. And you could have taken, like, really the exact same concept, and you could have made something great out of it. I really do believe that George Lucas did have a really good idea. Other than that, I can't make any excuses for him. I don't know what the fuck happened. But at any rate, hey, you know what? In the future, Disney's got control of Star Wars now, and, you know, so far I'm okay with the movies that they've released, the new ones. So, who knows? You know, maybe they'll do a remake one day. You know, they'll do a remake of the Star Wars, and actually, honestly, I wouldn't really have a problem with that. You know, start from Episode 1, do it right. You could even, like, have the Gungans in it, have them with the weird bat ears and the duckbill fucking thing. Just don't make them all fucking Wisa, Yusa, da 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 da, fucking stupid bullshit that they had. Do away with Count Dooku altogether, because what a fucking worthless character. You know, and have Darth Maul essentially be the main villain up until Episode 3 when Anakin kills him. And that way you'd be sort of like, dude, Anakin just fucking killed Darth Maul. I mean, can you imagine how much more, like, of an impact that would have had if Darth Maul had been the villain throughout the course of the trilogy? But that's food for thought, you know? What I'm saying is, I think there's a good idea there. I think that also there is still a possibility to do something really, really good with it. But, you know, hey, time will tell.